Okay, so this is the jig in your booklet. It's a bit of a simplistic drawing, but you get the gist. We're going to make a piece of timber, put 245 pieces of tilt fillet either side, and then we'll use that to run a square piece of timber at 45 through the saw. It'll all become apparent once we've made it. So we'll go in the joining shop and we'll get one made. So all I've done with this, I've picked up a random piece of plywood. The width doesn't really matter as long as you can get your tilt fillet jig and your pieces of wood there. It needs to be strong enough to hold its own weight. I've just put a saw cut in, but I've stopped the saw cut short. Obviously I haven't cut it in two. And on the back, that spelts quite a bit. So what you don't want is a splinter from plywood. The glue that you use in plywood tends to go septic if you end up with a splinter in your hand from plywood. You need to get it straight out. You can't be leaving it in because they go nasty. Right, okay, so what have we got? We've got the baseboard. Doesn't matter the thickness as long as it's sturdy enough. We've got the saw cut or the kerf that matches the circular saw that you're going to use. We've produced 245 pieces of timber. It doesn't really matter what size. And all we're going to do now is put them either side of the saw cut. Okay, like so. And what that will do, we will push that onto the blade later. And then any piece of timber that we put in there that is square will be cut at 45. Because the timber will be sitting at 45 and the blade is still 90. So that saves doing all the adjustments that you've just seen me do. Moving the blade, winding it all the way to 45, cutting the wood, winding it all the way back again. You don't need to do that with one of these jigs. So it's a good time-saving device for an operation that's fairly common, okay? Also, if you make staircases, you need glue blocks, and glue blocks are basically triangles of timber. I could literally now put that on the chop saw, cut short pieces. I've got my glue blocks, but it doesn't help me for the future if we want to make some more. Okay, so how do we fix that? I'm going to draw around these. I'll line that up with the edge of the saw cut and just draw a line on the back of there. Now we don't want the screws to come through here, so let's get the screws in the deep bit, in the meat, which is probably about there. So closer to this line than that one. Okay. We'll put a countersink in there now. We need a nice deep countersink in there. We need that countersink to be nice and deep because when we screw through the back into the front, these screws will effectively potentially be rubbing on the machine bed because it's going to be upside down. So let's get that well under the surface and then we don't have any issues later on. Okay, so let's go. Again, plenty of glue, don't be shy with this. It needs to be nice and sturdy because basically we're making a template to go on a machine. So it can't be a flimsy thing. You don't want this coming apart halfway through a saw cut. So plenty of glue on. Okay. Put that there, drop it onto your line. You can try and slide it and get a rub joint going on. This will make it stronger. I can't really clamp it because it's a triangle, so I'll just do my best to screw it without disturbing it. Okay, that's one ended, so I can lift that up now. Make sure it's on your pencil line. Yeah, still good. Turn it over. That's one. Okay, next one. Okay, the next thing to do is to put a stop on the underside at this end so that will stop that moving effectively. That will lock it into the machine bed. So when we get on the circular saw, I'll show you later, we can push that onto the saw blade. The saw blade will come down that groove there, and then this piece here will just lock onto the end. We can put a G-cramp on if you want to. They don't normally go anywhere. If we set the fence to there, it should be fine. So we'll screw that on now. So we'll start with some pilot holes again. I'll just give myself a guideline. I think I'm going to put it that way, just because I'm not sure what's underneath. You don't need it to be too deep. Okay, that's the top. I can guess the middle. Somewhere around there. Countersink your screws again. Again, nice and deep. We don't want these screws interfering with anything. Okay, right, so here's our timber. I'm just going to harris this with sandpaper, just because we're keeping it. So I want to make sure nobody gets any splinters off it on my account. Okay, and I'm just going to go around here with the sandpaper. And be very careful when you're sanding plywood, because like I said, if you get a plywood splinter, it tends to go septic. So I always make my sandpaper curved like that. Keep your finger and your thumb on the other side, and then I literally sand like that, so my fingers aren't on the timber, because I've done that many a time. You put your hand flat, you're doing this, and you end up with a splinter in your finger there. So keep the sides up. You should do that anyway, but on plywood, definitely. Keep your hands away from the edge of the plywood. Just to make sure, if you give it a good sanding, you won't get any splinters anyway. Okay, so back to the glue. Beautiful. Put that under your timber. Line it up. There's nothing hard and fast about this. Ideally it needs to be square to your edge. Yep, that's all good. Turn that from drill to screwdriver and just guess your torque. Just do it lightly for now. I'm going to double check this side again, square. That edge is square, so I'm okay with that. Line that up. Okay. So that's the other side done. So that is the jig ready for when you need to cut your tilt fillet. You can go straight for this jig, and that'll, every time, you can put that in the machine and we'll cut some tilt. So we're going to do that. We'll use that on the machine now, and we'll see how we get on.